Hey guys, Ruben Lara here, and today we're going to talk about two techniques I use all the time for simple shading using the Lasso Fill tool and curves. Now I use this technique all the time, especially when I'm doing rough storyboarding, thumbnailing, concept sketches. Now the problem is I end up doing a lot of my under drawing and basic layout on a bunch of different layers like you see here, but I get to a point where I have a hard time making layout and scale composition decisions when I have all of these intersecting lines overlapping each other in all these layers. So what I want to show you is how to make a version of the Lasso Fill tool that quickly adds a white base layer to any of your sketch drawings that just helps you separate out your elements while you're designing. So here I have a quick little poster, do your part to protect others, wear a mask. Kind of has a little bit of that vintage retro poster feel. And I'll just go over what's happening in my document so far. I got a crop layer, a text layer, and then a layer with all my sketches. Got a baby, a scarf, a mom, a dad, and we have our background. So I'm at a point where I feel like maybe I want to adjust some of the positions of something, or maybe just get a better sense of what these shapes are going to look like. Now one thing I could do is I could just take my regular lasso tool and come here to the dad, for example, and then just start making a selection and deleting, and little by little I'll slowly start to just delete pieces of my picture so that I can just get a clean composition. But I kind of don't like doing that because maybe I want to go back, maybe I want to try a couple things. So what I'm going to show you is a very non-destructive way of achieving the same result. I should say that another way of doing it too would be, for example, to let's say we wanted to cut the mom portion out of the baby here. I could make a just a rough selection of the baby, select the mom layer, add a mask, grab the mask and just invert it. And now we've gotten rid of the mom sketches underneath. The problem is though that once I start moving the baby around, let me get my move tool here. Once I start moving the baby around, then I'm missing that mask, and then I gotta move that mask. So it's a lot to keep track of. All right, let's get to it. I'm gonna undo that, undo the mask I just made, and now we're back to where we started. Command D, deselect. So if you're not familiar with the Lasso Fill tool, it's such a helpful tool. I'm just gonna make a new layer real quick to show you what it does. Now you may have noticed that I have a bunch of tools lined up in my command bar. These are my most used tools that I'm always reaching for in just about every project. I'll show you how to drag those in as we go along. But if you go over here to your direct, what do they call it? Just open this up a little bit. Your direct draw section. I'm not quite sure why Lasso Fill is in the direct draw section, but it is. It behaves very much like a lasso would, except that it immediately adds a fill using whatever color you're currently on. So this is the normal lasso functionality, just a straight lasso. But if I grab Lasso Fill, come down here, Command D, deselect, and I'm on a red, and I make a lasso selection. As soon as I let go, it'll fill with the current color. So that is true of any color. There's my gray, and I'm just going to go ahead and grab a white, and you can see that it will also fill with white clearly. Now the version of the Lasso Fill tool we're going to make makes one change to the blending mode of this tool. Now the blending mode simply applies a mathematical equation to the color in a way that affects whatever else is currently on the layer. As an example, I'm just going to go ahead and make some marks right here. I'm on a new layer. I'm going to go to my Lasso Fill tool. I'm going to start reaching for this one up on my command bar because it's easy to reach for. And let's say I pick a red color here, and I'm on the single layer, and I go ahead and make a selection, and I fill it with red. Well, it overwrites the black lines that I just made because it's just painting normally. I'm going to undo that. If I change this to multiply, it behaves much like the blending modes and the layers do. So now I'm going to make a shape, and now it multiplied the red over the black. We're still on one layer. It's still a solid red if I move this over, but within the layer it has applied the multiply algorithms so that we're multiplying that red over our existing shapes. So we want to leverage what happens when you multiply white over anything, and the answer is nothing. White doesn't affect any colors underneath it when it's multiplied, but what we gain is a shape that ends up having a solid fill behind our colors. So let's see what that looks like. I'm just going to go ahead and make that white. I'm going to go back to my lasso multiply, and I'm just going to make a quick shape here and go all the way around. I'm letting go, and it may seem like nothing happened. Well, that's because we're multiplying white on top of this layer. But when I move this over, we can see that now there is a solid white background that we've overlaid onto this line work in a way that blocks out anything else underneath it. So that is this technique, is to use the lasso fill in multiply mode with white, and we can quickly go through each of our layers and just block out and separate what these shapes are. Now, instead of changing this every single time, I'm gonna come here to my lasso fill tool to multiply, and then I want to go back to normal, when I want to use a normal one, all I did was duplicate the subtool and then permanently change it to multiply. And that way I have two versions of the lasso fill, one that's on normal and one that's on multiply. I'll set that up for you again so you can see me do it from scratch. So I'm going to take this one, I'll delete it. And you can see it also deleted it from my command bar here. So this is what your setup likely looks like. I'm going to grab the lasso fill tool, I'll right click, duplicate the subtool, and I'll just call it lasso fill multiply, and we'll hit OK. So now we have two versions of the lasso fill. I'm going to drag this up and just drop it right next to my current one. So now I have the lasso fill tool, and if I hover, it should tell me what it is, and then my lasso fill multiply. Now the only challenging part is that they both come with the same icon. So what I've done is I've created a bunch of custom icons, which you can go ahead and purchase on my Gumroad store if you want. You don't have to do it, but I find it's helpful. You basically come in here into the settings of the subtool, and you can choose one of the existing icons that come with Clip Studio, or you can choose your own. So I'm going to choose my own. And once you purchase that pack and open it up, I have Lasso Fill Multiply and a few others I'm going to show you about today. We'll select that, and that turns it into a little lasso fill tool, except with an M. So now we have our two versions of our lasso fill. The last thing we need to do is change this into multiply, which we didn't do. So we'll grab that and change it into multiply, and now we're all set. All right, so we have our normal lasso, normal, and lasso fill multiply. Okay, now that that's done, to separate out these different pieces, all I need to do is reach for my lasso fill multiply, make sure I'm on white, and just do a rough outline of each of the segments I want to start dividing up in my piece. So I'll come here to the baby who's on top, and I don't have to do it all in one fell swoop. It's a white, so nothing happens if I kind of do it in pieces here. And again, this is just for me to separate things out. It's just a real quick way to just keep evaluating my composition. I'm going to do the same thing with the mom. I'll pull off this scarf for a second. And again, I'm doing this in pieces. See how clear it just starts making my composition once I'm able to just quickly split out these different pieces. Now the mom's arm is on the same layer as the mom, so let's go ahead and fix that. I'm going to remove the baby. I'm going to grab my normal lasso tool, and let's just do a quick selection here. I'm going to use the selection launcher cut and paste, which cuts it off of that, paste it to a new layer, just like we would expect. I'll call this mom arm, put this on top of baby like this, and now mom arm needs to be filled with the lasso fill white tool. So we'll just do this, and we don't really need too much there, but it's really mostly to just cover up a little bit of that baby section. Good. And I think when I had before I had cut the mom's arm out, I had already put some of that that white background from the lasso fill, but no worries. I can just hit the letter C, go back to my normal lasso tool, and C turns me into paint with transparency down here. So C flips between painting with opacity, painting with transparency, and I can just eat right out of what I had just done. Great. So I have now the arm, the baby, and the mom on separate pieces. I don't have to do the dad since he's in the back, but why not? I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway because I may want to play around with some values in the background. Now again, these aren't my final drawings, right? I'm just concepting out for myself, maybe for a client, before client approval. If you want to get a sense of what you've done with the white, you can go ahead and adjust your paper and just tint it ever so slightly to a gray, and all of a sudden that white starts showing up really nicely. We can go back to my dad layer, and I can just go ahead and finish blocking out whatever I feel like I need to block out. Turn off that baby, and yeah, that's pretty good. Get the rest of the dad in there. I think not sure what I was doing there, but anyway, the mom's head is covering it up already. So we'll do that and that. And now I have opportunities to continue to play around with, some other shapes that I'm thinking about. So for example, here I had a scarf for the mom, and I'll go ahead and just do that as well. Just do a quick little block in, and there's the scarf, maybe a little bit of that hair shape. something like that. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Now I can play around with other shapes, that I might be thinking about as well. So for example, I have some reference on my screen, off the screen recording here, but I was thinking about maybe playing around with, with a scarf shape that does this. Kind of wanted to see her neck a little bit. And maybe some hair. I know this maybe is a little bit less retro, but I don't know, I haven't really decided yet. It feels like a little more classic working type of a feel too, right? So that's another version. And come here, grab my Lasso Fill white and just quickly block that in. It just helps me really quickly take elements and just evaluate them one at a time. I can also start coming in here and let's say go back to my other scarf and start moving, for example, the baby, the mom, the arm, the scarf, and just really start playing around with where, what the position is. And now I have some real, or at least some more accurate feedback on, what's going to happen with this composition as I move these pieces around. Now, let's say you want to undo the Lasso Fill Multiply background that you just put on. Well, that's super easy. As long as you stayed with the white for the background, you can use Clip Studio Paint's Edit, Convert Brightness to Opacity to just take it right back to where it was in line work. And what that does is it takes any white values and makes them completely transparent, and it just leaves whatever grayscale values you had remain. So for example, I'll take this baby and we'll say Edit, Convert Brightness to Opacity, and essentially it's back to where our sketch was. Now I've also added that as a shortcut right here on my command bar. So I use this all the time. I'm going to undo, but I can quickly grab that, Convert Brightness to Opacity, go back to my sketching, add, remove, put my white background on, and just keep making good decisions based on the shapes that I'm having. Now the next thing I like to do is leverage Clip Studio Paint's adjustment layers and tonal corrections so I can start adding tone and value to my image. One of the easiest ways to do that is to use the tonal corrections found in Edit, Tonal Correction, Hue, Saturation, Luminosity. Now I've set it to Command U. I like to try to match as many commands to my Photoshop workflow since I'm often switching between both programs. It's not set to Command U by default, but you can go ahead and find and do that in the shortcut settings there. But for example, I might take this baby and just hit Command U and go ahead and drop the luminosity, and now I'm starting to get some tone, on each one of these elements, so that I can separate them out. I should note though that once it has some gray on it and you use the Convert Brightness to Opacity, it's not going to knock that background out anymore. So it is helpful to keep it white for as long as you can before you start adjusting the luminosity on that. Now, if you're an advanced user, you can go ahead and just use levels to crush those lights, back down, and then do a Convert Brightness to Opacity, and you're back where you started. So I'm just going to go ahead and undo that, and now we're back at our white state. So instead of directly affecting the layer that I'm working on, sometimes I'll use adjustment layers to add tone and add quick lighting setups to each one of these pieces. So let me show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to grab baby and just go ahead and put him in a folder. This is another shortcut that I've set. It's found in the layer menu item, create folder and insert layer. I've set that to Command G like Photoshop as well. Either way, it puts your current layer right into a folder. So I'm going to grab baby and come here to the adjustment layers and say new correction layer and add a hue, saturation, luminosity. This was the same as doing it directly with Command U. I'm going to drop that luminosity, and now I'm at the same point that I was just a few moments ago, except now I'm working with that hue saturation as a layer. So it's a little bit more non-destructive, and it's something I can always undo. I still retain my white background there. So I've given a tone to the baby, and now I can use another adjustment layer, which is a curve, to add either highlights or shadows to this particular layer. So I'm going to go back to the new correction layer and add a tone curve. Go ahead and darken this, something like this. We'll grab the mask, hit delete, and now I can use my Lasso Fill tool again to start eating in and painting in, the curve mask layer, and just really have fun, exploring what I want this this shadow shape to be. Again, I can hit the letter C and start eating out of it, hit the letter C again. Again, C is flipping between my paint with transparency here at the bottom and paint with opacity. So as soon as I'm painting with opacity, I'm painting into that mask. And as soon as I'm painting with transparency, I'm painting out of that mask. Super organic, really fun way of experimenting with lighting in your piece. Also, this also works with light, curves that are adding light to the scene. So I'm going to add another correction layer, and we'll add another tone curve, except this time we'll curve it upwards. This will be our light. Select that, delete, and now we can come in here and, oops, I forgot I was on paint with transparency. So I'm hitting the letter C, or I can just tap that. And now I'm adding highlights, exactly where I want them. I can just go to town and just start playing around and, discovering where I want some of those highlights. Now this might look like a lot of work, which is why I've set up actions to automatically add shadow curves and light curves. You can do this on your own, but they're also included in the Gumroad product I mentioned earlier, custom brush and tool icons for Clip Studio Paint. So all you have to do is come into your auto action palette. I'll go ahead and drag this out so we can get a good sense of it. It's called RL Basic Lighting. Super easy to install. Once you download the product and uninstall it, you import the RL Basic Lighting.laf file, and you'll get a whole category of actions under RL Basic Lighting, and they're pretty straightforward. So for example, I'm just going to go ahead and grab these and delete them as if we never had them before, and go ahead and just select shadow curve and hit play. So that automatically adds the shadow curve, deletes our mask for us, labels it shadow. Now all I have to do is grab my Lasso Fill tool and do exactly what I was doing before. The same thing applies to the light curve. One thing you can do in your auto action palette is go ahead and here into the menu and go into button mode. That way you don't have to hit play every time, and you can just click one button. So now we're going to add a light curve, and automatically we can just start adding our lights in there. Now I've gone one step further to program a basic light setup that does all of this automatically for you just with one click. And let's see what that looks like. So I'm going to grab these two layers again. We'll pull this baby layer out. So we just have our basic sketch layer. We've already done our Lasso Fill multiply to give it a white background. And I'm just going to click basic light setup, and automatically look what happens. We've got a tone curve and a blank shadow and light curve for each element, and it puts it in a folder. It defaults to naming an element, but you can name it whatever you want. Now I can just come in here, go ahead and, again, re-identify my shadow shapes. I'm going to do the same thing with the mom in the scarf. Basic light setup. She has a tone now. Now I can come in here on the shadow layer and just start playing around with, what this kind of backlit light might look like. Hitting the letter C, eat back out. Maybe kind of do something like that. Start getting these little, mask shapes. So this is a great way to just really start playing around with, what your lighting intentions are going to be. Super non-destructive. Do the same thing with the dad. Come in here, basic light setup, gives ourselves a tone. The other thing I can do is go ahead and just adjust that tone and make him dark and only add a light layer if I wanted. I want to make sure that I'm painting with opacity again, not painting with transparency. And there we go. We started getting our nice light setup. And I can keep on adding shadow and light layers as I need. So if I want to go even darker on our dad, of course I didn't really use the shadow layer yet. I just adjusted the tone. So I can come in here and really just start, finding some interesting shadow shapes. In here, if it's too dark, I just double click and adjust that tone curve. So it's a real organic way of just coming in here and finding, quickly finding just the lighting that you might be looking for some of these shapes. Come back to the mom. I'm going to add another shadow curve. Now we don't have any lighting on this arm yet, so I'm going to do the same thing. Come back to the arm, give myself a basic lighting setup, just start off with the tone. Oftentimes you just need the tone and the light layer, so maybe you don't even need that shadow layer sometimes. So I'm just going to add a little bit of, maybe a little bit of light there. One thing I haven't done yet is remove the blue lines from some of my sketches. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab that one and this one and just undo that little blue layer. I often use that when I'm sketching. Now I have a better sense of how these shapes are going to fit together. Now when I do my final piece, I'm definitely going to go in and redraw this with clean line art, and maybe even start using some of these lighting shapes that I started experimenting with as the basis to really kind of trace out some really beautiful line shapes before I do my final. But when I'm doing a final, I'll often use the same technique to color and light my pieces, except then I'm just dealing with cleaner, tighter line work. And because I use this technique all the time, I've also dragged these auto actions into my command bar and then given them custom actions as well. The way to do it is really easy. I'm going to come off of button mode. You can grab any one of your actions and just drag it right into your command bar. The same thing happens with actions. They all come in with the same icon. So all you have to do is right click, go to the icon settings, specify an image file, and then you can use any one of my custom icons or make your own or do whatever you want to go ahead and differentiate it. So I do have an add light curve and add shadow curve in here. So we'll just say add light curve, we'll hit OK. And now we've got our custom icon that identifies that particular action. And of course, to remove these, you just click on it and click delete. But now what I can do is I can just use these icons on the top. As you can imagine, I'll just grab another layer here and go ahead and, there's a light layer and there's a shadow layer. So to review, we duplicated the Lasso Fill tool, switched it to multiply, added it to our command bar, added a custom icon. And if we make sure we use the Lasso Fill multiply with white, we can very quickly add white backgrounds to our sketch layers so that we can quickly separate information that's happening in our composition. And we also discovered how to use curves, both light curves and shadow curves, to quickly add tone and some really quick lighting notes using the Lasso Fill tool as well. So again, you can light your scene using curves manually, or you can create your own auto actions, or you can go ahead and use the exact same ones I was using in the demo today. Head on over to my Gumroad store and download that custom icon and action set. You'll not only get the actions, but a ton of custom icons that are lettered and numbered, so you can really use that command bar to the full, especially when different brushes have the same duplicate icon. All right, guys, I hope that was helpful in just speeding up your sketching workflow. Make sure to like and subscribe to my channel, turn on YouTube notifications. And if you don't mind, head on over to my website at rubenlara.com. I've just added an opt-in email feature. So please throw your email in there, and that way I can keep you posted not only on new things from Gumroad and my Skillshare training, but also any new YouTube and offers that are coming along these days. So as always, have fun, and we'll see you in the next round.